Okay, you're all set to go.
Thank you, Sarah. Good evening and welcome to the October 3rd, 2022 meeting of the Town of Barnstable Planning Board. My name is Steve Robichaud. The Planning Board's public hearing this evening will be held at 7 p.m. via remote participation methods. Alternative public access to this meeting shall be provided in the following manner. The meeting will be televised via Channel 18 and may be viewed via the Channel 18 website at streaming85.townofbarnstable.us/cablecast public site. Real-time access to the Planning Board meeting is available utilizing the Zoom link or telephone number and meeting ID provided below. And public comment can be addressed to the Planning Board via those methods. The link is townofbarnstable-us.zoom.us/J/844-238-47693. The phone number to dial in is 888-475-4499. And again, the meeting ID 844-238-47693. Applicants, the representatives, and individuals required or entitled to appear before this board may appear remotely and may participate through the link or telephone number provided above. Documentary exhibits and/or visual presentations should be submitted in advance of the meeting so they may be displayed for remote public access viewing. Application materials may be accessed by contacting Karen Herrand at karen.herrand@town.barnstable.ma.us or calling 508-862-4064. At this time, I'd like to introduce our all-volunteer board as well as staff. Starting with Bob.
Good evening, Bob Twist.
And Tim.
Good evening, Tim O'Neill.
And Steve.
Good evening, Stephen Costello.
And Michael.
Good evening, Michael Messinas.
And Ray.
Good evening, Ray Sexton here.
Thank you all. And staff, starting with Kate.
Good evening, Kate Maldonado, Assistant Director of Planning and Development.
And Karen.
Good evening, Planning Board Staff Admin Assistant.
Thank you, and Jim.
Good evening, Jim Kupfer, Senior Planner, Planning and Development.
Thank you, Jim. And a notice of recording this meeting is being recorded and broadcast on Channel 18 in accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 38, Section 20. I will now inquire if anyone else is taping this meeting, and if so, if you could please make your presence known. Seeing none, we will move to the general public comments of this meeting. This is for public comment unrelated to any of our agenda items. Sarah, do we have anyone for general public comment?
I believe everyone that's here is for public comment on items that are on the agenda. But if anyone is, if I'm incorrect, please speak now.
Excellent. Thank you, Sarah. And seeing none, we will move to the first item on this agenda this evening, which is a subdivision.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a preliminary subdivision, Old Stage Road and Parker Lane. William Egan has submitted an application for a preliminary subdivision plan entitled Preliminary Subdivision Plan of Land on Old Stage Road and Parker Lane in Barnstable, Mass. Prepared for William Egan, 70 Newport Avenue, Osterville, Mass. 02655, dated June 21st, 2022. This is not a public hearing and does not need to be voted upon to open.
Excellent. Thank you, Bob. And at this time, we'd ask the applicant to present.
Good evening. My name's Frank Gallagher. I'm the design engineer, and I'm here representing Bill Egan. And I can see Bill Egan is also here. But I can kind of take you through the plans quickly, if you'd like. We have a parcel of land that's fronting on two streets. It fronts on Old Stage Road, and it also fronts on Parker Lane. We did an A&R plan some time ago, I guess maybe a year ago now, where we created lots with frontage on Old Stage Road. And at that point, we had two buildable lots that we showed on that plan, and then we had a remaining land that was labeled as non-buildable. And again, the lots were buildable with their frontage coming from Old Stage Road. What we're presenting to you now is a plan that would basically make improvements to Parker Lane. And we'd make improvements beginning on Service Road and extending across what we're showing as Lot 2A and Lot 3A. And with those improvements to Parker Lane, we're presenting that as constituting adequate access for those two lots. So that would essentially legitimize their frontage on Parker Lane. Parker Lane is a, you know, it's existing right now. It's existing as, you know, a pathway, at least in this area. It's a pathway through this property, and it extends it from the Service Road all the way out to Old Stage Road. We want to just improve it in front of these two lots. We don't intend to extend those improvements all the way out to Old Stage Road. But with what we propose, there's an existing 33-foot wide layout for Parker Lane. That's been in existence for quite some time. And the roadway that's on the ground has been in existence as well for quite some time. We want to improve it to an 18-foot wide gravel roadway. And if you look on my plan, you'll see the cross section in the upper portion of the plan. 2 9-foot lanes. The roadway would consist of gravel. We're showing a 9-inch thick gravel base for the roadway. And then if you look at that cross section, you'll see that it's super elevated to go from the high end, which would be on your left side, and then slope from left to right. And we're showing an open swale on that right side that would handle the stormwater. And that would then discharge at one point to a stilling basin that we've shown, or an infiltration basin that's in the northern, I guess, well, let me say actually it would be, I guess, the southeastern corner of Lot 3A. And then the swale actually continues from there all the way out to Service Road. But we're showing that it would end in a leaching catch basin before it hits Service Road. So that's how we are intending to handle the stormwater. We have a hammerhead type turnaround that we're showing on Lot 2A, and that is essentially in compliance with the detail that you have in the back of your subdivision regulations. We've shown details on the leaching catch basin and the infiltration basin, and we've also listed the waivers that we were looking for this roadway. And we've met with the town engineer, we've met with the planner, and we've met with the assistant fire chief, who's, I guess, the person for this particular fire district in town. And we've gotten input from all of them, and we've incorporated it into this plan. the roadway itself, the improvements are, the total length is 827 feet. The hammerhead turnaround actually occurs at about 738 feet. So based on that, we're not asking for a waiver from the length of a dead-end road. And I think that waiver would be required if we were more than 750 feet, which we are slightly under that. So we did not propose that as a waiver from the regulations, but we did ask for waivers from the street cross section, drainage requirements, sidewalks, curbing, roadway foundation, which called for 12 inches of a gravel base. We are proposing 9 inches, as I said. Roadway surface, which would be pavement, sidewalks, and street trees. If you look at our plan, we actually show areas that we've outlined where we're saying trees would remain. So in lieu of street trees, we're trying to set aside pretty substantial areas that would remain wooded. Really, at this point, this whole site, both lot 2A and 3A, are completely wooded. So that's our proposal, I guess. We can gladly answer your questions if you have any.
Thank you, Frank. I thought that was great. Good detail. Some good work on this. And Jim, if you wouldn't mind, I'd love if you could give a brief overview on this as well as just educate the board on the difference between a preliminary subdivision and a definitive subdivision.
Certainly, absolutely, Mr. Chairman. Before you this evening is a preliminary subdivision plan. For residential subdivisions, this is actually an optional approach to subdivision of land. A preliminary subdivision does not, if it moves forward tonight, does not give the landowner or the applicant an opportunity to build. It is really seeking this board's guidance and direction prior to filing a definitive subdivision plan. So there will be a step 2 to this. I will say the applicant has certainly reached out to our office at the planning office, as well as working closely with our town engineer. Both him and I have spoken. I know they did reach out to fire as well. So we certainly have gotten some early upfront comments on this. Obviously, there are a number of waivers being requested. This board, is well versed in this type of request. It is in the West Barnstable area where perhaps rural character should be considered, and that's what the applicant is suggesting here. And that the waiver request is wholly for the reduction of standards to align with the rural character in the neighborhood. So again, tonight, if the board does agree that this is moving in the right direction, the findings here would be that as described about existing rural character, but also a decision that would be rendered that would be either an approval with certain amendments. So those amendments being suggestions that would move forward as the applicant considers applying for a definitive, or disapproval and the reasons why for that disapproval tonight.
Perfect. Appreciate that, Jim. And I would just like to go around to the board now and get some comments. Bob?
I'm good, thanks.
All right, thank you, Bob. And Tim?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No, this looks pretty straightforward. I think a lot of the concerns when looking at these have already been addressed, things like drainage and a turnaround space for the fire department. I think the only thing that I would ask, I know that this is a preliminary and this is kind of for the applicant's informational purposes, but If this was to come for a definitive approval, I think I would lean strongly on a comment letter from the fire department and the town engineer just to kind of verify what is drawn on the plan would work, and that the fire department would be good with turnaround space and access. The only question I had, and I am not sure, I think this part of town, there's not a public water supply. So the last time we were looking at a subdivision plan, there was the fire hydrant conversation. So I don't think there's town water in this part of town. So I don't know if that's even part of this equation or not. But I'd look to the fire department for their recommendations on that. But other than that, I think it's a very well detailed plan, and a lot of the things we'd be looking for seem to be incorporated in it.
Well said, Tim. Thank you. And Ray?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think Tim's spot on. I think we need some input from the fire department. I would say earlier rather than later, so that if there are any issues, as Tim touched on, requirements for hydrants or that the turnaround is okay, meets acceptable standards, I would recommend that we tag up with the fire department to make sure that there are no surprises further down the road. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ray. Appreciate that. And Steve?
Thank you, Stephen. I guess one question comes to mind. Since the road does connect, is the turnaround imperative? I'm sure it could be added here. There's plenty of land. I'm just more of a general question. In terms of the lot and the waivers, I have walked the site here. It is a beautiful wooded site. It's kind of nice to be able to see some of this rural character maintained. That's really a pretty part of Barnstable. So I'm completely fine with kind of the waivers as they're laid out in relationship to how these two lots have been created. So that's it for me. Thanks.
Okay, great. Thanks, Steve. And Michael?
I'm good, thanks.
Okay, excellent. I'm all set as well. I think a lot of good work was put into this, and I do appreciate the rural character remaining. I think it's an appropriate fit. So at this time, we'd entertain a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Do we have to inquire about any public comment before I do that?
Let's see. Not on this one. This one is not a public hearing.
Great, thanks. So then I propose the following findings of fact, which are found on pages 2 and 3 of the staff report dated September 29th, 2022. Finding number 1, the application for tentative approval of preliminary plan, Form B, is William Egan, trustee, Old Stage Road Realty Trust, on September 8th, 2022. Number 2, the preliminary subdivision plan is shown on preliminary subdivision plan of land on Old Stage Road and Parker Lane in Barnstable, Mass, dated June 21st, 2022, by Gallagher Engineering. Number 3, the applicant has requested certain waivers in order to maintain the rural character of the area, in accordance with section 801-5.B(1) of the Code of the Town of Barnstable. Waivers from construction standards to maintain rural character. The planning board has made the following findings. A, granting of the waivers requested are in the best interest of the citizens of the town. B, the plan is well designed and in keeping with the general design principles set forth in Article 6 of the subdivision rules and regulations. C, there is an adequate access to the lots for the uses intended thereon. And D, the plan is in keeping with the character of the surrounding area. So having proposed those findings of fact, I move to approve the preliminary subdivision of plan of land on Old Stage Road and Parker Lane in Barnstable, Mass, dated June 21, 2022, by Gallagher Engineering, subject to and incorporating the findings of fact I just read into the record.
Excellent. Thank you, Bob. And do we have a second? I think that was Steve. Thank you, Steve. And all those in favor, Bob?
Aye.
And Tim?
Aye.
And Steve?
Aye.
Michael?
Aye.
And Ray?
Aye.
And myself, Steve Robichaud, votes aye. And the matter passes.
Well, thank you all very much. We
Thank you, Mr.
appreciate
Gallagher.
meeting with you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Same to you. Thank you. And the next item on the agenda is a regulatory agreement. Steve, if you could read that one.
Certainly. Shoestring Properties LLC seeks to enter into a regulatory agreement with the town of Barnstable to construct 34 condominium units in 2 buildings with associated improvements at 110 School Street and 115 School Street, Hyannis. The redevelopment consists of 22 3-bedroom units and 12 2-bedroom units. A total of 70 parking spaces will be provided. And I believe maybe Mr. Kenny has some information. There was a subcommittee hearing on this today that both Steve Robichaud and myself, as well as some counselors who have been appointed to that subcommittee, met and discussed. So turn it back to you, Stephen.
Perfect. Great. And I appreciate it. We had our first subcommittee meeting today. Thought it was great. Jim, do you want to step in and just give an overview of the process thus far and how we see it rolling forward?
Sure, not a problem. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the Dockside Regulatory Agreement public hearing has been opened. At the first meeting of the public hearing, there was a general presentation by the applicant and a recommendation by the board that a subcommittee be established. That subcommittee did meet this morning for the first time. Again, a broad presentation by the applicant, followed by questions and comments by the subcommittee. That subcommittee is scheduled to meet again. The date is close to being determined and will be noticed publicly, as was the first subcommittee meeting. Tonight before the board, obviously, is a continuation of the original public hearing that is before this board. So if the applicant wishes to provide a brief update, that's certainly appropriate. However, certainly the recommendation from staff would be a continuation ultimately to a date certain. And the planning board's next meeting, I believe, is October 24th.
Thank you, Jim. And I echo Jim's statements. Happy to take an update from Attorney Kenny. We want to keep most of the discussions and deliberations in the subcommittee until the subcommittee has, completed, and then, come back to this board for further discussions. I do also encourage all members of the public, as well as this board, to watch the recording from this morning's subcommittee meeting, which will be available on the planning board website. And we're also committed to having our second subcommittee meeting as quickly as possible to continue to move this process through. Attorney Kenny, if you have an update, please go ahead.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Attorney John Kenny, representing Shoestring Properties LLC. I represented to several of the interested parties here this morning that my only comments tonight would be to request a continuance. So I will limit my comments to a request for continuance. Attorney Lawler was there on behalf of Mr. Kirker. Felicia Penn was there this morning as an interested party. And so I emailed them and represented to them. My only comments, again, would be to request a continuance. We have a prospective second subcommittee meeting on October 13th. If we can meet that day, I think October 24th would be a great date for the continuance. If that date is still up in the air, then I would suggest the first meeting in November for the continuance.
Great.
From my perspective, everybody on our side can make the meeting on October 13th, so I'll defer to Mr. Kupfer as whether or not the town can be there.
Great. I believe we are just waiting for final confirmation on that. But even with that being said, I do still think it is appropriate to select October 24th as our date of continuance. And at this time, unless there's any additional comments, I would entertain a motion to continue. Ray, go ahead.
Just a quick question to be clear. So at this point, we're not getting an update per se on today's meeting. We're waiting till the next meeting of the subcommittee.
Well, no, that's a great point. Let me just give a quick overview. Essentially, we listened to a full presentation by the applicant, same presentation that we heard at this board. It was appropriate to do it again at the subcommittee for the town council members as well as the other members present. We then took board comment questions, kind of worked through it a bit, and what we propose at the next subcommittee meeting is to hear from department heads. To name a few, DPW, conservation, fire, building, to offer questions, comments, concerns to those department heads who have worked through the site plan review and can educate us on certain information. So that's essentially where we're at, Ray, and hope to move through it as quickly as we can, but while also being as thorough as is necessary.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm glad that the Conservation Commission will be intimately involved in this.
Excellent. Appreciate that, Ray. Any additional comments before we entertain a motion to continue? Okay.
Stephen, I move to continue the RA 2022-002 Dockside Residence, 110 School Street, 115 School Street to October 24th, 2022 at 7 p.m.
Excellent. Thank you, Steve. And a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Bob. And all those in favor? Bob?
Aye.
Tim?
Aye.
Steve?
Aye.
Michael?
Aye.
Ray?
Aye.
And myself, Steve Robichaud, votes aye.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Attorney Kenny. Okay, next up, we have a zoning amendment to discuss. And Tim, I believe you're going to read this one.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a proposed zoning amendment, TC item number 2023-023. The proposal is to amend Chapter 240 zoning, Article 3, Section 240-39, Shopping Center Redevelopment Overlay District by repealing and replacing the existing zoning ordinance to allow for mixed-use development, including multifamily dwellings, hotel and office uses with specified parking and dimensional requirements within the overlay district. In addition, the proposed amendment incorporates affordable housing requirements for multifamily dwelling development, updates parking requirements for retail and regional shopping centers, updates landscape requirements, and updates special permit provisions and procedures, among other proposed amendments. The hearing is already opened.
Excellent. Thank you, Tim. And now I'm going to have a presentation by the applicant.
Thank you very much. Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. For the record, my name is Eliza Cox. I'm an attorney with the firm of Nutter, McLennan and Fish in Hyannis, and I'm here on behalf of Mayflower Cape Cod LLC, which is the owner of the Cape Cod Mall property. I do have a PowerPoint presentation with several slides, and so I'm just going to pull that up and then walk you through the slides. Can everyone see my screen?
Looks good. Thank you.
Okay, good. Thank you. So joining me this evening is Tim Fox from Simon Property Group. You'll hear from Tim as we go through our presentation. Just by way of background, so we're here to discuss the Shopping Center Redevelopment Overlay District and some text changes that we're seeking to be implemented to the existing zoning. I'm going to refer to it as the SCROD, which I think is one of the best acronyms on Cape Cod for zoning overlays. This is codified in section 24139 of the zoning ordinance. It was established originally in 1996. Actually, I think that's a typo. It's 24039 of the zoning ordinance. It was established originally in 1996 as a special overlay district to encourage renovation and redevelopment of the Cape Cod Mall property. You can see the boundary of the SCROD on the graphic on this screen with the yellow hatch marked. You see the mall, obviously, which is the big building here in sort of beige. With the zoning amendment that's before the board, we are not proposing any changes to the map of the overlay. It is just text changes. So the overlay, as shown on the screen, contains about 65 acres, and there is about 700,000 square feet of building area associated with the mall. The existing overlay authorizes retail shopping center uses, which is a defined term in the current zoning. What I'd like to do right now is actually turn the presentation over to Tim to walk through this slide and provide some of the rationale as to why we think this makes sense. And then I will handle the following slides that walk through some of the changes that are proposed. So Tim?
Thanks, Liza. My name's Tim Fox. I'm with Simon Property Group. We've owned the mall for just under 25 years. And this is an initiative that has been in the works for some time. Really, I think it dates back to probably 2018, which is when we started the redevelopment project of the former Sears, the current Target and Dick's Sporting Goods. Elizabeth Jenkins and I had conversations for quite some time. And really the last, say, 2 to 3 years is when a lot of the hard work took place, where we were, making modifications and working with staff to amend and update the SCROD language. In the course of that time, and really before then, there have been some major changes within our industry, and I'm sure that many of you are quite familiar. First and foremost is the advent of online shopping, which has transformed retail as we know it. And most recently, COVID has just kind of really amplified and accelerated a lot of those changes. And what the biggest change that's occurred is that there's a big division between kind of lower quality commodity type retail and then the better quality, really kind of irreplaceable retail real estate. And I think, a lot of the news has been about, retail or dying malls. And that's true to a certain extent, but that's largely focused on some of that kind of commodity type product that I mentioned. The higher quality retail has actually, fared quite well. And it's a capital intense business. So, it requires some significant investment. I think we've certainly shown that across the country and particularly here on the Cape with, the redevelopment that I mentioned before. And then we did an extensive renovation, both on the interior and the exterior of the property in the last few years. That is a continuing process. You can't really ignore that or you get left behind. And these dynamic centers, the ones that have improved over the course of time, they're the ones that have been able to kind of change and pivot with the times. And a lot of that is due to, some of the shifting focus away from strictly retail and restaurant offerings to some of the other uses that we're talking about in this amendment, specifically multifamily, hotels, and to a lesser extent, office. And that's in place across the country. It's also in place locally. Just a couple of examples. North Shore Mall, which is another Simon property, is a good example where, we're beginning to integrate some smaller office, but hotel uses as well. Residential is an approved use, although there isn't residential today. And then Auburn Mall, which there's no hotel or residential there, but there is a significant office component that was introduced a couple of years ago, and that's been it's been quite successful as a pivot away from some of the big box retail that has started to phase out of the market. I think the amendment helps us to get to the next step in the life cycle of the mall. It's been successful, and we've been fortunate where maybe other retail centers haven't been, where we had a hole, we had a Sears store, and that wasn't going to work, and we were able to successfully replace that retailer with another great retail name too. In fact, that incidentally were the top two performers through COVID, Target and Dick's Sporting Goods. Which was just, I think, a bit of luck for us, but that's just the way it turned out. Right now at the property, there's an abundance of parking. It's overparked. I don't think anybody would debate that. I mean, my guess would be, at least a third of the parking on the property is seldom, if ever, used. And we think that there's we could do better. And we've talked to staff about, some of our ideas of how we can improve upon that experience. And I think that this amendment is the first step in that process. So I will turn it back over to Liza as she does the rest of the presentation.
Great. Thanks, Tim. So I wanted to provide an overview of the major portions of the modifications. I did see, which was very helpful, and thank your staff. Included in your packet is a red line that shows exactly what the changes are. But with these next few slides, I just wanted to touch on some of the highlights. And obviously, if the board has questions about any of the specifics, we'd be happy to try and answer those. So first, in terms of uses, the proposed changes do seek to allow several new uses into the overlay, all of which are defined terms within the proposed overlay. This includes offices, which may be allowed now based on the definition of retail shopping uses, but we wanted to be more explicit and clearly allow offices in the overlay. In addition, the proposal seeks to allow hotels, which are presently not allowed in the overlay, and multifamily dwellings, again, also currently explicitly not allowed in the current zoning. In addition to allowing new uses, the proposed changes also eliminate some existing uses. Specifically, right now, the current zoning allows tire, battery, and auto accessory stores. That's proposed to be now excluded with these changes. I think that was in there in response to the Sears automotive store that used to exist on the site. The town staff asked us to remove that, and that's now proposed to be removed from the zoning. There were some changes to building height in the proposed amendments. Specifically, we're seeking to create a separate building height requirement for hotels and multifamily uses, which would be the lesser of 55 feet or 4 stories. Those figures may sound familiar to the board. As you may recall, when the proposed changes to the medical services overlay zone was sought before the town. This is the New England development parcels behind BJ's, behind the Wilkins campus. That was the height that was approved for multifamily out in that zone. So it brings that forward here for these two uses in the SCROD. In addition, working with town staff, there was a recommendation to include some outdoor recreational space for hotels or multifamily uses. And so there is a provision in the proposed changes that would require outdoor areas for those two uses. We also, working with town staff, were asked to modernize some of the landscaping requirements and model some of the landscaping requirements that currently are not included in the SCROD, but exist in other portions of the zoning ordinance. And so you'll see there are changes to the SCROD that seek to incorporate landscaping language similar that was contained within section 24053 of the existing zoning ordinance. In addition, as Tim mentioned when he was speaking on the last slide, we've also looked very carefully at the parking requirements, and we are looking to include updated parking ratios, which would lessen the parking requirements for retail shopping uses within the overlay, and then incorporate new parking requirements for hotel uses, which are slightly less than what is otherwise required under the zoning ordinance. for hotels and other districts. And in addition, incorporate specific parking for multifamily. The ratios that we're proposing for the hotel is 0.75 parking spaces per guest unit. For multifamily, we're looking at 1.5 parking spaces per dwelling unit. In addition, another, I think, major change to the proposed zoning is to incorporate an affordable housing requirement section, which is proposed subsection M of the amendment. This section we worked, again, very closely with town staff on, and we have incorporated language that essentially requires the greater affordable housing associated with multifamily development that would require the greater of whatever is required under Chapter 9 of the code, or that 10% of the units be restricted at 65% AMI and 3% of the units be restricted at 80% AMI. And so when a particular multifamily dwelling comes forward, to the extent the code requires more than the 10% at 65 and 3% at 80%, then we would be subjected to whatever Chapter 9 of the code requires. I think, one of the things that I thought was worth reminding the board and mentioning on this slide is the economic significance of the Cape Cod Mall, our region's shopping center, major shopping center, both within the town and also within the region. So in terms of its import to the town from a tax perspective, the mall properties is assessed at a valuation of $110 million. The mall is the largest private taxpayer within the town of Barnstable, and it's nearly 3 times higher than the next largest taxpayer. I think there's one taxpayer that's higher, and it's Eversource. In terms of employment opportunities, there's nearly 1,000 jobs at the mall, so it is a major employer. And there's a significant number of food and beverage tenants, which contribute to meals tax, which ultimately can benefit the town of Barnstable. So wrapping up, again, with this zoning amendment, we're seeking to lay the foundation to allow for future redevelopment opportunities. Obviously, as specific redevelopment projects come forward under the proposed zoning, those would go through the regular permitting process, which would likely involve the Cape Cod Commission, depending on its size, and the Town of Barnstable Zoning Board. There are existing zoning decisions affecting the property, and likely those would have to be modified in connection with future redevelopment opportunities. And so any impacts associated with a particular project coming forward will have a thorough and public vetting process. And so with that, I think we'll pause. Obviously, again, to the extent the board wants to dig into any of the specific changes or has any questions for us, Tim and I are both here to try and answer those. And finally, again, I just wanted to thank the town staff for working with us. As Tim said, it's been a very collaborative process, and we're really pleased to be here this evening presenting these changes to you. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Appreciate that presentation. I just wanted to start off by saying to Tim and Simon, I have to give your team a lot of credit. Retail has suffered some major changes in the past decade or more. And I've just been impressed how the mall seems to continue to adapt and modernize and remain a destination for Cape Codders. So I just wanted to start out by saying that.
Thank you.
Jim, do you have anything you wanted to add before we go to some board discussion?
No, just that as this board knows, tonight you're reviewing a zoning amendment that was presented to you by a town council. The charge here this evening is to review the zoning amendment as proposed and provide a recommendation back to town council.
Great, thank you. For me, I'll kind of lead it off. I love anything mixed use. I think this is a great proposal. A lot of great work has been done to this zoning amendment, to the draft before us. When you look at this site, there's so much parking, and there's so much parking that's not utilized. Even during the busiest month, the Thanksgiving to Christmas time, there's still so much parking that's not used. So to put it to use in this way, I think is smart. Selfishly, I kind of wish that it was only proposed to do multifamily and not hotel, because we need housing so bad. But I get it, and I think it makes sense. Just wanted to lead off with a question, then we'll turn it over to other board members. Do you feel that the, let's see, I think it's section I, paragraph 1, impervious surfaces. Do you feel that the 70% limit for total impervious or non-impervious surfaces, do you think that that's potentially limiting? I know you probably don't have a specific development ready, but I'm just curious if that is too restrictive in your opinion.
That is one of the portions of the amendment that we looked at, and our engineers analyzed that particular provision, and I think we felt that as it's written, it would not be limiting, and that we felt like development, at least development that we see that's kind of on the horizon would fall within that limitation.
That's great. Okay, excellent. Turn it over to other board members for questions and comments. Bob, if you could lead it off for us.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I did have a chance to go through the proposed amended ordinance section by section, line by line. It did raise a couple questions in my own mind, which staff was able to answer. Those questions simply dealt with whether there was a particular proposal coming forward or whether this was anticipatory of perhaps future proposals coming in. And I was assured that it's not geared to a particular planned proposal. So that's about the only question that I really had that staff had to answer for me on that. I do like the fact that it goes into multi-use to open it up to related issues that are different from what's there now. I like the fact that it allows multifamily affordable housing. I like the fact that the lot, it appears almost 100% impervious now with the concrete or tar parking lots covering the vast bulk of the area that's not underneath the building. The planning anticipated by the draft ordinance does allow for recreational areas to be incorporated within housing or mixed-use areas, which will presumably increase the permeability aspect of some of that land. The proposed reg or ordinance rather does work in landscaping requirements and setbacks and things of that nature, which ensure that any multifamily affordable housing, which is constructed consistent with the proposed ordinance, will have the type of amenities and surrounding physical environment that people who occupy that housing are entitled to have in the housing. There's a link. The proposed reg opens up a link between the existing retail to expand the economics of the area substantially. To the extent that people are able to live in much closer proximity through the affordable housing, multifamily affordable housing, who could then walk to the mall. It will decrease vehicle trips to get to the mall, will increase presumably the market for the merchants who are in the building now or will be in the building in the future, in that people who live close by will be inclined to either walk or take a short drive to the mall and use those businesses in there, perhaps in a greater amount than is currently being used. So there's a link amongst a number of different aspects of the economic and land use planning issues we look at by the proposal of the amended ordinance. So I've looked at it. Everything looks good to me. I recommend its approval and forwarding to town council with a positive endorsement.
Thank you, Bob. Appreciate that. And Tim?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think I share the same sentiment with you as well as Bob, that I think this is a very beneficial zoning amendment, giving the applicant in this area of town a lot of flexibility in its use to be able to develop more affordable housing and having more flexibility in that area and housing in general. I think it's great. It's a good area of town for this and to increase density. It is served very well by our existing traffic infrastructure and sewer and town services and utilities. So I think, we're talking about increasing our housing stock in town. Here's a great place. And, just like everyone else, I've driven by the mall my entire life and seen the tumbleweeds going through the parking lot. So I think being able to convert some of those parking lots to some different uses, and also hearing that 70% impervious calc would work, converting those over and getting some more landscaping and green space outside. I think it's great. That's it. I did think there was a public comment letter from Attorney Kenny. I don't know if we want to do that at the end or if we just discuss that before we go through the rest of the board comments.
Yes. I just wanted to get through board comments first, and then I'm going to turn it over to some public comment. Thank you, Tim. That was great.
Mr. Chairman, can I interject for 1 second?
Absolutely. Yes, go ahead.
I wanted to clarify your question about the 70% impervious, because if you read further in that section, there's a note that qualifies some groundwater mitigation land, and that is actually something that we have in place. So I just wanted to clarify my answer just a little bit for the record.
And that's referring to the kind of one-to-one swap where an off-site. So you're saying that should that come into play, you have some off-site land that could be used for that?
Yes, in fact, it has, and we do have the off-site land that of groundwater mitigation.
Excellent, great.
It's already been restricted, yeah.
Correct.
Oh, beautiful, appreciate that. Ray, questions, comments from you?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, a couple of questions, and I just put to whomever can answer them. The first is, would underground parking be contemplated for the multifamily or the hotel facilities?
It is a possibility. However, that wouldn't necessarily be, the most cost-effective manner of addressing additional parking. I mean, we feel like, as others have pointed out, that there's a surplus of parking, surface parking existing, and so the intention, if we were to add density to the site, would be to utilize some of the surface parking, and then potentially consider structured parking.
Okay, thanks. I was understand that that's the long suit in this is parking. I was just thinking in terms of maybe that's also a way around the barn to increase the of the permeable portion.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So, but I do understand that that's certainly going to cost more money than using existing hard. The another question, and this might be for Jim and company, is does this amendment allow for residences above shops, drive-throughs, things like that? Because I know that the Target has a drive-through now. Actually, you can drive through and buy liquor there. And just inside, open disclosure, my wife used to work there. She tried managing that mess, and actually the whole navigation around there is kind of scary. But that's something different, I think, in terms of when you get into the details of actually developing, then there might be time to reconsider traffic flows and things like that. But but hearing about the drive-through for the Target, is that part of the existing zoning, or would it be part of the new amended zoning?
Well, I'm happy to start that response, and Eliza or Tim, if you'd like to join in. So in the zoning, in your red line version, you'll see under prohibited uses, which is, sorry, just scrolling to it right now, section, it's refreshing. So within the permitted and prohibited uses, F in the lowercase d, drive-throughs and restaurants and drive-through banks, except that of a drive-through bank shall be permitted in such of the shopping overlay district as it lies in the underlying business district, is only allowed in the drive-through restaurant subzone, which is essentially where the Chick-fil-A is right now. So my understanding is the drive-throughs would be prohibited. And in terms of above, over retail, I don't believe, and again, Eliza, please correct me if I'm wrong, I don't believe anything prohibits that design method from being proposed.
Yeah, that's right. The multifamily dwellings are an allowed use, and as Jim said, or proposed to be an allowed use, and there's nothing in here that would prohibit them from being above retail.
Terrific, that's great. The other thing that is important to me, I would really like to see language along the lines of for the portion of affordable housing to be something like at least 10%. I don't know. Right now, it's the greater of Chapter 9 or 10%. But I would really like to see a more ambitious goal, if possible. And we've talked about this, so I'm going to be the guy pushing for that. We have any number of proposals coming before us, and each time I would, and some of my colleagues would like to see the number of affordable units to be increased whenever possible.
If I could respond to that, Mr. Chairman. So the language right now requires either what's required by the code, Chapter 9 of the code, or 10% of the units at 65% AMI and 3% at 80% AMI. So more than right now, if nothing changed with the code, you would have more than 10% of units restricted as affordable. You'd have 10% at 65% AMI and 3% at 80% AMI.
Right, and so at minimum, what I'd like to see is at least inserted in front of the 10%, and plus 3%. That would make I would be much happier with that. I'll put it that way. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Ray. And Steve?
Thank you, Steve. Quick question for Elizabeth Jenkins. How does this ordinance, how does this zoning amendment compare to the Cape Town Plaza in general. Does this fall within the same kind of zoning structure that we're talking about changing?
So the base zoning is similar. Both this district as well as the Cape Town Plaza or the Kmart development have at their base highway business about 200 to 300 feet back away from the regional roadways, and then business for the remainder of the district. This particular overlay was crafted together with the Cape Cod Commission. I believe originally, I don't want to give a date inconsistent. I know Eliza gave it at the beginning of her presentation, but it was crafted together with the commission, I think in 2008. Does that sound right?
1996 originally.
1996. To essentially allow for comprehensive redevelopment of the entire property owned by the Cape Cod Mall. So it supersedes the development in the base overlay. So if there's anything inconsistent between this zoning and the base, this overlay controls. So it's almost boutique zoning written exclusively for the mall, to be able to think of a multi-parcel development with multiple owners to be developed under a comprehensive zoning scheme.
I guess that just it kind of, the way I look at this, and I'm kind of thinking about what we were asked to do at the medical overlay district, essentially, where, you know, we kind of switched gears where it was exclusively medical. And then there were parcels that were abutting that were asked to be included. And I mean, I certainly recognize the value and importance of Simon Properties as a taxpayer and as a fantastic tenant and employer in the town of Barnstable. I look at it from what makes sense for us in terms of how do we maximize the availability of development and like structures that clearly would be perfectly in line with all of the thoughts that Simon Properties has in terms of their projected uses of this property. I guess one question maybe for Tim is that, specifically asking for hotels, it leads me to believe, have you had inquiries? Do you have an idea of, the type and quality of potential hotels? The only reason I bring it up is we've got, a Marriott essentially surrounding the mall, right, on both sides. And those are obviously well-established and known entities, which I'm sure drive a lot of our visitors and tourists there. Do you have a feel for the type of hotel that you would envision if, in fact, it ended up being a hotel versus just a housing opportunity?
Yeah, in response, we've evaluated a handful of different scenarios. Nothing's been finalized, but hotel is included in some of the studies. In full transparency, I think our first area of focus is that parcel of land that abuts 28, kind of across from the bank, which I think is a nice opportunity for future development. In terms of the potential use and hotel type, we've done many different hotel developments just as a company, either in partnership with hotel developers or we've even done a couple on our own elsewhere in the country. The common theme for us is quality, and in fact, the group within our company that focuses on non-retail assets is called asset intensification. And the idea is that anything that we do kind of outside of the four walls of the retail is meant to improve the quality of the property in general. So some examples of hotel development, there's quite a few Marriott products. So Residence Inn is a flag that we've developed in the past. There's AC by Marriott, and then there's a couple other just kind of normal type Marriotts that have been successful in the past. So that's a possibility. I think that's something that we would strongly consider. We've done other more kind of boutique developments. There's a development that we have in Atlanta, Georgia right now that's called the Nobu Hotel, which is, it's probably not right for this market, but it's just an example of, it's a different, best in class type operator, hotel operator that, that's what we're going for when we consider non-retail assets.
Thank you. That's helpful. Can I see the map just of the whole parcel? I just want to look at something that just crossed my mind as Tim was talking.
Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to share my screen if you like.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you. Oh, sorry, former chairman. Sorry, Steve. Okay, perfect. So the thing that crossed my mind, I know, surprisingly, there are these ponds, and I assume they're natural ponds that kind of looks like one is sort of intersected with the boundary and property line. And I don't know the status of those. I'd be curious to know, just from just kind of a conservation standpoint, what is the situation with those in terms of their standard that they currently exist in? Because it seems to me you have the potential to maybe improve just the natural surroundings by potentially making those things either more visible or attractive. I'm just kind of thinking out loud, and I don't think it necessarily relates to this specific request, but as I sort of looked at the site and you start to think about where the likely expansion is going to take place, it seems to me, if you would maybe confirm, are we really looking at that as I'm facing this map, kind of that bottom right section of that parking lot area in the space where the old auto Sears Auto was? Is that what you're thinking, or is it more in the other area to the left, sort of opposite the Macy's entrance there?
Yeah. So you can see the outline of the former Sears Auto building.
Yeah.
That doesn't exist today. This is a dated aerial. Where the cursor is now would be the kind of initial focus for any development opportunity. And then going back to your other comment, have you visited the property lately? Because if you haven't, I would invite you to go in the back entrance, which is kind of, if you move, right there, where the backside of Target is, because we had the exact same mindset where we felt like those are, and I'm a reformed engineer, so take what I say with a grain of salt. This isn't official, but those are retention ponds that were created when the development was initiated way back when.
Yep.
And they've kind of morphed over time, and they've established themselves as there's some protections over them. So when we did the redevelopment project with Dick's Sporting Goods and Target, we had certain approvals that we had to obtain through the Conservation Commission. But the first kind of and largest pond that's adjacent to the retail property, that's been cleared out entirely, cleaned up. There's new native plantings. And in fact, there's a nice sitting area that's on kind of the northeast corner that's the closest to the rear entrance of the building. So if you haven't been there, I would invite you to do it. And that's kind of where our head was at. It's kind of the same place, is that we felt like, hey, this could be an asset, and it should be, because it's a pretty nice setting for being a retention pond. And that's kind of what we thought when we repositioned that entrance, is let's kind of embrace this opportunity. And we haven't thought that far down the road for what could happen next, but that's kind of been our thinking as well.
Okay. And as long as we're on the map here, where the cursor is, Jim, if you could just move that down to those two connected parcels there to the left, right? Those are the ones that we received a correspondence. I believe it came in today from Attorney Kenny. Are those the ones that are being requested to be included? Is that accurate?
Yes, those are the parcels.
Okay. I mean, because obviously from this perspective, with the clear boundary of the mall property as well as the boundary of the pond that abuts those two lots, I want to hear Mr. Kenny's take on this and what their thought process is. But as I'm looking at it, I don't want, it's like when you do a puzzle, I hate like odd pieces that you can't fit somewhere else. This seems like a puzzle piece that could fit. So those are my only comments, but thank you.
Okay, thank you, Steve. And Michael, questions, comments?
No, I do not have any more comments. I mean, I want to be repetitive. I mean, you guys, this is all great points. I mean, I appreciate the development. This is great. I leave 10 minutes away from that. I always ask myself too, why we have so many parking and it's not utilized. So I think this is a great project and it will look great. Again, I don't want to be repetitive. I think this is all I have to say for now. Thanks.
Perfect. Great. Thank you, Michael. We'll go to public comment at this time, and I'm going to start with Attorney Kenny.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning Board. Again, for the record, Attorney John Kenny with the Law Office in Centerville. I come before you this evening representing 37 River Street Limited Partnership. And those two parcels that Mr. Costello just pointed out are owned by my client. One's at 230 Falmouth Road, and the other, believe it or not, is 793 Iono Road, which is Route 132. Why the assessor's office has it that way is beyond me, but it's the two parcels are essentially to the left of the TD Bank building if you were standing on Route 28, and between the bank and Fresh Holes Pond. These parcels were leased. The back parcel, 793, is still under lease with a Cape Cod Mall for parking purposes. The front parcel had been under lease. Now that lease has expired. Both parcels were part of the expansion of the mall. They were used for parking, or required by the mall to be used for parking. I don't know that anybody ever parked there to go to the mall because you basically need a bus. But during that mall expansion, right next to the TD Bank to the left is a road called Fresh Holes Road. That road is across the street, goes all the way out to Bear's Way, and it enters onto the property there next door to the mall, next door to TD Bank. It actually runs all the way through the mall out to Route 132 and across 132. That was the original layout. The town abandoned the road, but my client's properties, both parcels have right over Fresh Holes Road. I have worked with three different owners trying to get an easement from the mall people to use the infrastructure that's located at the mall entrance at Route 28, the traffic light, to go from our parcels through the mall parking lot to that traffic light to come in and out. We do have a application pending with the state. It's been sitting there for a while to reopen Fresh Holes Road. That is not our preference. I don't think it's a proper layout. I think that it makes sense for us to use the infrastructure that was built by the mall as part of the expansion to get to our property. And I don't think it's an unreasonable request because the access to my client's property was cut off by the mall as part of their expansion. Then a median strip was put down Route 28, which basically, even if we get our road open, we would be right in, right out only. So somebody coming from my office in Centerville, if they happen to have business on my client's property, is most likely at this point going to come down, if we have to reopen Fresh Holes Road, come down, bang a U-turn at the light, and then come up and bang a right-hand turn to go into my client's property. I don't think that's a safe layout. You're the planning board. One of your primary charges is to make sure that we have a safe layout of roads within the town. In talking with Attorney Cox earlier today and email correspondence over the weekend, I agree with her position and her client's position that you can't really condition an approval of the zoning of the zoning change with a condition that they grant my client an easement over their property. However, you can defer this for a period of time to give us an opportunity to negotiate a binding agreement for an easement. As I stated earlier, I represented one party that owned the property. The mall at one point agreed to give us an easement. I drafted an easement. I sent it to the mall's attorneys, and Attorney Cox was not involved in any of this. to the mall's attorneys. It was returned to me as a license. I changed it back to an easement. We went back and forth, and it became very clear that we weren't going to reach an agreement. The next owner came along, and I sent emails to the Simon attorneys and received no response. And now the current owner of the property, one of the representatives has been discussing directly with Mr. Fox the property, but we have no commitments for an easement. The only thing we have is a commitment to discuss it further. And frankly, we will have no leverage if this goes through to basically get an easement that I've been trying to get for years that I think makes sense. We are not trying to interfere with the mall's redevelopment of this area. It's hard for us to put a proposal forward for an easement location because we don't know what they want to do with their property. We're willing to enter into an agreement, a binding agreement, granting us a right over their property to get to and from the traffic light for all purposes for which roads are used for access to our property, and giving them the right to relocate it so long as it's reasonable access to and from that property. So the other part of my request is we would like our two parcels, and I think it makes common sense to include our two parcels into this overlay district rewrite. They are excluded, but if you look at the assessors map by St. Anne, you'll see it's all parking for the mall. So we're not in the shopping center overlay district, but we would like to be included. I think they've done an excellent job, and I thought Attorney Cox did an excellent presentation on what the zoning changes are. We would respectfully like to be part of it, and most importantly, we need to get an easement. Otherwise, you're going to have a curb cut right up the street from the mall traffic light there. I'd be happy to answer any questions the board may have.
Attorney Kenny, just I guess help me understand this a little bit. So essentially, obviously, logically, somebody can gain access to these lots because they can simply turn at the right and enter the properties. But it sounds like legally, say it were to be developed with an office, that office wouldn't be able to obtain a license with the town to operate because it doesn't have access. Am I right in explaining that?
Jim, can you pull up the map? The front parcel there at 230, right kind of where the cursor is now, currently has no access. We do not have a legal right to go over the mall property. And right next to, if you can bring that cursor back, Jim. Right next to the property line there, that strip of land that's between 230 and the TD Bank land, right where the cursor is now, that is Fresh Holes Road. That goes up into both parcels and all the way up through the mall, although it's now been usurped into the mall parking area. That is what we have a curb cut pending for, and it's just a stone's throw from the intersection served by the traffic lights for the entranceway to the mall. But that 230 has no rights to go over the mall property to get in and out. The other property is at 793 I&O Road, the piece just back behind that front parcel. It's under lease with the mall, and the mall has a lease right to park cars there. So under the lease, people can come and go to that back parcel. But the front parcel, again, I mean, it's wide open. Nobody stops you. But if we develop our sites, you can be guaranteed we'd be stopped. So we have no access other than the access provided by the lease in the back parcel to the 793 I&O Road parcel, and none to the front. So either we open up Fresh Holes Road or we get an easement.
Yeah, understood. Potentially
Steve,
be a roadblock to development. Yes, go ahead, Steve.
Yeah. Mr. Kenny, I'm just curious, what kind of use would your client be considering here? I go down, I hate to say it, but there's a West Marine there, and I visit it far too often for all the wrong reasons. But I'd be curious, it seems like a narrow parcel, but is it adequate for the type of uses that you're envisioning, which I'd like to know what those potentially may be?
Housing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Rental?
Multifamily housing.
Okay.
I mean, certainly it would seem illogical to have a second curb cut there. Just two things, and then I'll go to Ray. That was you, right?
Yeah, please.
Okay, perfect. I'll come to you in just one moment. First off, I know that this zoning amendment is strictly related to the text. I know Jim and I spoke about this earlier. So there's no proposal to the change in the map. And Jim, correct me if I'm wrong, but that would have to be a separate agenda item to look at and modification of the map.
Right. Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm glad you brought it up. Yeah. So what is before you this evening is a proposal to amend the text of the zoning ordinance. There is not, as you mentioned, a proposal to amend the zoning map itself. Obviously, I and many members of the town certainly have had a lot of conversations with the landowner there, and there are some merits to what Mr. Kenny is saying. Certainly, making shared access as this board always likes to do. But I believe that would need to be a separate petition, and we as the town are certainly willing to work with the landowner in guiding him through that permitting process. In addition, if I may, just in reference to the easements, Ms. Cox had referenced any proposal will likely have to go to the Cape Cod Commission during that development opportunities. There is discussion on access and proper arrangements. The same may be the case also for Mr. Kenny's client. If it is multifamily housing, may need to also go to the Cape Cod Commission. And again, we would be looking for proper access, shared easements. So that may also come up in the specific permitting process. But in terms of what's before you tonight, it is the text amendment and not the changing of boundaries within a map for zoning purposes.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Jim. And obviously, be happy to consider that and see if that makes sense, but would have to come before us, as a separate agenda item. And as you mentioned, Attorney Kenny, we can't condition an easement, although you do bring up some very compelling points. Certainly can
Jim,
feel your
respond to a couple of the comments that Mr. Kupfer made.
Absolutely. Go ahead.
Whether these parcels have to go to the Cape Cod Commission or in front of any other board, if they're separate parcels and we don't have an easement, if you pass this and then we go to develop our site, I don't know that any board has a right to demand that Simon Properties give us an easement over their property. So this is basically the only time we or the town has any leverage to make this requirement. And that's the whole point of all of this. I have no problem with our client. We're not looking to hold up the mall's changing of the SCROD, and we have no problem with coming back at a later date and asking to amend the map and include our parcels into it. The concern is the proper layout of roadways to get to and from our property. If we don't do it now, you're not going to have a right to order it, and we're going to be reopening Fresh Holes Road. We won't have any other choice.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Steve, go ahead. I'll go to
my only thought is that, if in fact we're talking about additional housing, as we've all thought and focused on, I would hate to see us lose an opportunity. Clearly moving ahead, just for the sake of sending it back to the council. I know Simon as a stellar, taxpayer and employer in the town, it's critically important to maintain their integrity and make sure that they have every opportunity to succeed. I'm 100% on board with moving it forward. I just think that if we could allow perhaps Simon and potentially Mr. Kenny's client to speak, I don't see the harm in having us put this up for a vote and a recommendation at our next scheduled meeting. That's my position. So I just want to put that out there.
Yeah, Steve, I appreciate that. And I was thinking the same thing. You know, certainly a continuance to the next meeting is not a massive delay. I mean, you hear that this board is in favor of this project, and I think it would make sense to allow some time to try and vet this out. Ray, you wanted to make a comment? Sorry for the delay there.
Well, actually, Mr. Chairman, in your astute manner, you preempted my question, which was going to be, it appears to me that we have two separate actions in terms of amending the map. And on the other hand, Mr. Kenny's point is well made in terms of do we provide in some fashion access to that parcel, particularly if it's meant for housing, in our recommendation of this specific map, unchanged, to the council. That's a question. And also, just if we recommend, for example, will there be changes, like, for example, change the verbiage for the affordable portion of affordable housing to increase it at least 10% as opposed to its current 10%. If we approve this, do we have another bite at the apple to tease a little bit more affordable housing out of the subsequent development?
Mr. Chairman, could I also chime in on this? So first of all, I guess I would just, couple things. I agree with the comments that were made earlier regarding what's before the board, and that is changing the text and not the map. I think, you know, in the future, if Mr. Kenny and his clients do bring forward a petition to change the map, you know, we're happy to weigh in on that and, you know, evaluate what's proposed. Is it a subzone that's proposed? Is it part of the SCROD that's proposed? I would just note that I believe that portion of Mr. Kenny's client's property is within either the HB or the B, which do allow multifamily dwellings right now under the underlying zoning. So it's not like including it in the SCROD would otherwise preclude it from having multifamily. Those can be developed under the existing underlying zoning that affect the properties. Secondly, as it relates to easement and access, you know, this board and the town cannot require my clients to grant an easement to another property owner. That's a private property transactional arrangement. We are now in discussions with Attorney Kenny. This process is not the end of the process for a zoning change. And so what will happen now, after hopefully the planning board makes a recommendation, it will go to town council for another public hearing. So, you know, respectfully, delaying it here, it's not the end of the process here. There's still plenty of time for us to continue to have conversations as appropriate before we go back to town council.
I appreciate that. Thank you for that.
Tim, I don't know if you had anything to add as well.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, if I could add, you know, I would hate for this process to be derailed, and I want to add some information to what Mr. Kenny had provided. I've personally been involved with this property for 8 years. I've not heard from Mr. Kenny up until last week, and I believe that his client obtained ownership interests in the property that abuts Route 28 less than a month ago. You know, as I said, this has been a process that we've been working on for several years, and you know, it's quite late in the process, and we're happy to have discussions with Mr. Kenny and his client, absolutely. But you know, I would be troubled that some recommendation would be conditioned on this item.
Thank you, Tim. Appreciate that. Yes, I just will state one thing, you know, quickly. You know, this board has not suggested and would not suggest in any way that an easement would be any sort of condition. So I just want to state that. Go ahead, Mr. Kenny.
I hadn't heard of Mr. Fox either, so we have not been communicating directly, and he's correct. My client actually bought both of these properties recently, But I've represented the prior owner and the prior owner before that for the front parcel. I drafted documents. I've been back and forth with their in-house counsel. We were told we would be granted an easement, and as I stated earlier, it came back as a license, and we went back and forth. And I found out later on that I think there were a little bit of hard feelings between my client at that time and the mall over a possible purchase of the property. The second client, I sent 2 emails to my prior contacts at Simons and never received any response. It didn't bounce back. I just never received any response to the request. I explained to them that it was a new client, a new owner, and we were looking for an easement, and I received no response. The current owner has been talking with Mr. Fox through a representative for several weeks now, I believe. They own the one parcel out front. They had the other parcel out back under agreement. And from what my clients have told me, I have not been involved in these conversations. They were told that Mr. Fox and his client did not really want to speak to them until they own both parcels, even though it's my understanding that they were shown the purchase and sales agreement, and the owner of the back parcel had authorized Simon Properties to talk to my client. So these negotiations have been going on for several years, and with the current client for more than a week. So it's been several weeks, and they've gone nowhere. And it's just, well, we'll discuss it. My only point is, and I have no problem, as I stated earlier, coming back to you on our own request to amend the map if necessary. My concern here is the easement. Give us a few weeks to work it out. We don't need to have a specific easement. We can reach a binding agreement that they will provide us access through their property to the infrastructure. It's a simple request.
Thank you, Mr. Kenny. I appreciate
that. If I could just weigh in one more time,
yes,
respectfully, absolutely. I don't think it's appropriate to co-opt this process to require us to engage in negotiations with the town. Cannot do. You don't have the authority, respectfully, to require my client to grant an easement. My guess is it's going to be a little while before we're before the town council. So, there is still time before ultimately a decision is made on this proposed amendment. My client just indicated he's willing to have conversations. I've indicated that to Attorney Kenny as well. I just don't see any reason or need to hold up this process before the planning board.
Mr. Chairman, if I may respond to that. If these were separate parcels, I could understand that argument, but keep in mind it was the mall that shut off our access. It's the mall that put the median strip down the road that keeps us from taking a left turn out there. So all we're asking to do is basically kind of put us back to where we were when you got it, except let's use your infrastructure in place and have a safe layout of the roads. It's not like we're just in a butter that we're asking the mall to give us an easement. They took our access away.
I understand. Thank you, Mr. Kenny. So at this time, I just want to, state, first of all, if there is any possibility of housing potentially coming out of one of these sites, it's something that's appealing to me and this board, as well as, potentially avoiding additional curb cut. Many of these meetings do take multiple meetings to vet through the items. And, if it is a continuance, I think that there still will be a favorable decision. I did want to just make sure that there's no additional public comment. Gordon Starr, I see that you're on. Gordon, do you have any comments to make on this item?
Not at this moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Gordon. And I also see Conrad Watson. Conrad, any comments this evening on this item?
Mr. Chairman, I represent Mr. Watson. He's one of the principals of the limited partnership.
Okay. Thank you, Attorney Kenny. And do we have any additional board comments, questions at this time? Steve, I saw you unmute. Do you have anything?
My only response to Ms. Cox, respectfully, too, I don't disagree necessarily where the notion of it's going to move back to town council for them to approve. We volunteer. We do what we think is our job to the best ability that we believe it's being done. And this process includes our input to the town council. And I value the amount of time and effort that we as volunteers spend doing this. I think all of us clearly do this out of the love of Barnstable and trying to improve the town. So to the degree that, you perceive, being coerced into a potential agreement, that's entirely up to you. If you choose not to do that, or Simon as your client chooses not to do that, we can't control that whatsoever. But in my opinion, as we see an opportunity to potentially take advantage of a site, if in fact it came to pass that no agreement is structured and we have to then revert to fresh holes as another curb cut with entry onto an extremely busy part of Route 28, I can see that posing more problems for everybody in the event that that has to happen. So I'm not saying that for anything other than I don't see the harm necessarily in just having this out there to be considered at our next meeting, where I think that by all of the input from essentially everyone on the planning board, you're going to have a favorable outcome. So the sense of urgency to make sure it passes tonight, I'm okay with that. That parking lot has been in existence. Clearly, Simon didn't value those parcels. They, I assume, had an opportunity or first right of refusal to purchase those over the last, several years, whenever they've changed hands. So to that extent, it seems as though there's no harm in bringing this discussion up at our next meeting. That's my own personal opinion and kind of where I would come down on this.
Thank you, Steve. I appreciate that. And
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Ray, go ahead.
I'd just like to underscore what Steve just said, and frankly, yourself. I think that this is best continued until our next meeting.
Thank you, Ray. I appreciate that. And also potentially we could look at and consider adding the words "at least" regarding the 10%. At this time, we will look for a motion on this item. Tim, you're muted.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to make a motion to continue zoning amendment TC item number 2023-023 to October 24th, 2022, planning board meeting at 7 p.m.
Thank you, Tim. And a second?
I'll second that, Mr. Chairman.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Ray. And all those in favor, Bob?
Aye.
Tim?
Aye.
Steve?
Aye.
Michael?
Aye.
Ray?
Aye.
And myself, Steve Robichaud, votes aye. We will pick this item up on October 24th at 7 p.m.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. And next on the agenda, looking for a staff update on the LCP. Kate?
Thank you, Chair. Kate Maldonado, Assistant Director of Planning and Development. At this time, we are actively engaged in our engagement and outreach for the local comprehensive plan. To date, we have a few meetings under our belt. We've been to the Katuitt Civic Association. We went to the Community Safety Day, as well as the Youth Commission, each an opportunity to obtain some feedback from our residents, as well as the youth, to get their insight on how we can make sure that we are communicating to residents of all ages. So their feedback was fantastic. So as our next steps is continuing to develop out that calendar. If you go on the barnstablelcp.com webpage, you'll see that we've listed some dates, but we're working on a more sophisticated calendar. It should be up live tomorrow or very shortly, and that'll give you a preview to see what events we will be at on a daily as well as a monthly basis. In addition to civic associations, we have committed to attending local community events like the Hyannis Open Streets, and other events will be included on that calendar. Another update is that we have developed a public comment tool and that's live on the barnstablelcp.com webpage where residents can start putting in comments for what their vision of Barnstable is. Thank you.
Fantastic. All good stuff. Thank you, Kate. Ray, yes, go ahead.
Mr. Chair, I just wanted to share with my colleagues that I attended the session to it, and Kate and Jim did a superb job. They really engaged the folks, and most importantly, almost immediately and through the whole evening, it became a cooperative effort. And I thought that was really terrific, considering how things tend to devolve into sort of pro and con. And this everybody walked out of there appreciating the points that they made, and it has sparked continuing discussion and at least spoken vows to continue to be involved in the process. So well done.
That's phenomenal. Appreciate that, Ray. We got some superstars, no question. All right, so next up, looking for approval of minutes, September 12th, 2022 draft minutes. Look for a motion to approve.
So moved.
Need a second? Thanks, Steve. Moved by Bob, second by Steve. All those in favor? Bob?
Aye.
Tim?
Aye.
Steve?
Aye.
Michael?
Aye.
And Ray?
Aye.
And myself, Steve Robichaud, votes aye. Future meetings, October 24th, 2022, 7 p.m. November 14th, 2022, 7 p.m. And any staff or board comments before we adjourn? Excellent. I would exercise a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So moved.
Give that to Bob and a second.
Michael Messinas, a second.
Thank you, Michael. All those in favor? Bob?
Aye.
Tim?
Aye.
Steve?
Aye.
Michael?
Aye.
And Ray?
Aye.
And myself, Steve Robichaud, votes aye. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you.